Southern agrarians. Southern agrarians are these group of, a group of 12 writers who wrote essays, collection of essays. And it was called I'll Take My Stand, the South and the Agrarian Tradition. This was a remarkable collection of essays which challenge industrial capitalism of modern America in the wake of the Great Depression of 1930s. So, from British literature and aesthetics, we are moving on to American literature, and we see the similar kind of angst, similar kind of problems that artists were facing in order to represent a reality which was so very so filled with so much of crisis and so much of problems. The 1930s economic depression in America, you know. So the writers advocated a return. Therefore, they could see the way in which capitalism, industrialism has, they could see the pitfalls of capitalism now, and they could see how it has transformed the whole world view itself. And people have, so the agrarians, as they call themselves in southern part of America, they wanted to challenge consumerism, capitalism, industrialization, and they wanted to get back to an agrarian based economy. We have moved far ahead from an agrarian economy to a mercantile economy to a capitalist economy. Now they wanted to go back to the agrarian economy, and by revaluing human labor, by saying that we don't need machines, we need to have more people working. But there are problems in saying that we need more people working. Who are the people who would be working? Of course, they would still be wanting people who are either slaves or, after the slave trade was over, at least people from lower economic background or black people to do that work. So it is not as if they wanted to go back to the agrarian based economy, but of course none of them wanted to actually work hard in the farms. So anyway, so the origin happened where agrarian circle originated in the Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, and between 1910 and 1930s, and they started talking about how capitalism, industrialization has completely, uh, completely destroyed the society and the lives of individual. Members included John Crow Ransom, Donald Davidson, Alan Tate, Robert Penn Warren. Many of these names are familiar to you because later on they went on to write literary criticism. And the group of teachers and students, they met in the campus of the university, Vanderbilt University, and they call themselves brethren, as if they are all they are all brothers of the same farm, the same kind of thing which came out in the 17th century, let's say the uh, levelers, or the so those kind of ideas. After the First World War, they continued to meet at Vanderbilt, and they turned to poetry, and they published a magazine which was called The Fugitives, and they wrote articles in the New Republic, and the fugitives they became known as fugitive poets also. By 1920s, rapid modernization had started, and Southern businessmen and professionals felt that their plantation culture had completely changed, because now everything is being done by the machines. And earlier they used to have yeomen and planters and so on. Everything is now being done by machines. And in some ways, southern part of America has always been a very conservative, hierarchical society. And this was, remember, during the slave trade also, slave trade continued in the South much more, many more days than it continued in the North. And therefore, there is a kind of a racial bias which is prevalent there. Modernization, therefore, posed a dilemma. On one hand, they wanted to go back to the fields, wanted to go back to an agrarian economy. On the other hand, white people did not want themselves to be working in the field. They were the ones who wanted to only be intellectuals and write about it. So they wanted a superiority over the blacks, but at the same time, they talked about themselves as brethren or as brothers. So this was a hypocrisy that we see among them. Modern life, therefore, threatened the white elite of destroying established power structure and social leadership. And so the agrarians, they went on to write many poems and many issues and magazines, the fugitive poetry movement. In 1932, the agrarian group promoted ideas of small scale subsistence agricultural economy as part of a public policy. And Robert Penn Warren was a major poet among them, and he won the Pulitzer for the King's Men, all the King's Men. And but in some ways, these poets were not able to relate their ideas with the reality. In some ways, there was a lot of gap between what they thought about, something that they thought of, the ideal that they talked about of going back to the ideal of the age, which is based on agrarian economy, that ideal. But in reality, it could never be got back, and therefore they were unwilling to make any effort to actually get back into that, but they were only talking about it. So in some ways, they were very escapist in their attitude, and probably the term fugitive poets, therefore, is quite right in talking about their ideas, which are very escapist in some ways. So they are naturally, this movement did not go on for a very long time. The agrarians were criticized for conservative, backward looking, unrealistic, romantic goals. They both ignored the material benefits of mass production and modern science. Because with machines, somewhere men, even the blacks and the whites, or the upper class and the lower class, were in some ways actually trying to, there was in some ways uh, at least a hope for equality. If not, of course, it can't be equal, but at least they were, there was a hope that men could actually be move up the social ladder. But the agrarians did not want that. Critics accused the agrarians of substituting myth for history. Agrarian version of history where slavery is humane and the work in south was leisure was actually very false and hypocritical. The agrarians tried to elaborate their social theories, publicize their views, forge alliances with many thinkers, but ultimately their focus dissipated after mid 1930s. So it didn't go on for a very long time. A failure happened because their political faith was not commensurate with the reality. Ransom and Tate then moved on, shifted their attention to from social criticism to literary criticism, and the others like Cleon Brooks and others, they started writing on political and economic activism, and they started talking about. Some of them actually moved towards new criticism, a very text centered approach to literature. Uh, The fugitive poets and new critics were both concerned, therefore, with formal aspects of poetry. And that is why this relationship that we see between the fugitives, some of the fugitive poets who moved on, or some of the agrarians who moved on to adopt new critical tradition.